for changing hearts and perspectives, and to be in community to appreciate one another and each other's perspectives and cultures. So we ask that you listen attentively, with empathy and with understanding rather than any judgment. As you just heard, we are recording this session. And so we have 2 or 3 people who have emergencies that came up, and as one suggested, restoratively, we've been able to address and accommodate their needs. At this time, I'd like to offer a land acknowledgement statement. We at DC Peace are beginning to use a land acknowledgement statement during each of our presentations. A land acknowledgement is a formal statement that recognizes and respects Indigenous peoples as traditional stewards to this land and the enduring relationship between Indigenous people and their traditional territories. The District of Columbia, which is where DC Peace Team is located, shares borders with Maryland and Virginia and connects with different lands along the Anacostia and the Potomac rivers. These river systems and current national parks are where over a dozen tribal nations lived. And so I also want to acknowledge, in addition to them, the tribes who migrated and passed through these lands and the tribes that were sadly erased through genocide and colonization. Our speaker, JoJo, is a Hatteras Tuscarora American Indian, and she's a member of the Lumbee tribe, whose territory is located in southeastern North Carolina. And so it's with great respect I acknowledge her and her tribal nation. I'm going to share, as part of my acknowledgement, and this is a little bit different than what we usually do, but I'm going to share a slide with you. And hopefully you can see it. Whoops.
Yes, we can see it. I can.
Okay, great. So personally, I want to acknowledge that I am currently on Piscataway and Doe traditional lands. In particular, I would like to pause for a moment in memory of Chief Billy Redwing Tyack, who died September 7th at the age of 85. Chief Tyack is the last hereditary chief of the Piscataway Nation. And this is some of what has been said about him. Chief Billy Tyack was a great leader who worked tirelessly advocating for tribal sovereignty and Indigenous rights. He recognized and encouraged leadership in others, and he opened many doors of friendship and opportunity across Indian country. He dedicated his life toward the preservation of the life and social change of the American Indian. Chief Tyack belonged to the American Indian movement. And I would like for us to pause out of respect and in our own way, give thanks for Chief Tyack, remembering he is the last hereditary chief of the Piscataway Nation, the area that I am representing. So let us pause for a moment. May he rest in eternal peace. And now it is my great honor to invite my friend JoJo into a time of discussion about her life as a Native American and how restorative justice, although what I soon discovered is not directly referenced as such, has been woven throughout her life. JoJo, I have learned so much from you, and I value deeply our friendship. So before we dive into your story, I have a couple of questions to help frame this evening's conversation. As you know, before I wrote up the registration form, I said, JoJo, are you Native American? Do I call you Indian? American yes. Indian? Indigenous right. People? I didn't know. And I soon discovered that this is a really big issue for today. So please share with us tonight, from your perspective, how to refer to you and your people.
I'm 57. So in my generation, I do not find it offensive at all to be called American Indian. I go by either just And in private, many people who call themselves indigenous, that's the new fashionable term now, is indigenous. But my grandfather was an Indian, and the famed American Indian movement, which is kind of equivalent to our civil rights movement. I figure if it was good enough for Mr. Dennis Banks and Mr. Russell Means, then it's good enough for me. And also, to replace Indian with indigenous, it's just using one colonizer term for another. So until you come up with something really good, I'll stick with American Indian, or even a Native American. I'm fine with that, but I don't really go out of my way to do indigenous. But I do not mind at all if I'm called indigenous. I'm pretty open to that. What I don't like is when other people correct me and say, because I've had that happen with other non-Indians, will correct me and say, oh, you call yourself an Indian, or, I can tell they're displeased with that. And I don't appreciate that.
So thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as we discussed, different tribes may have different values and different rituals. I think it's important for people who are on our conversation tonight to understand that much of what you are sharing tonight reflects your tribal ancestry and heritage among tribal nations. What we see in the United States in the movies is not what you have to share with us tonight. So would you like to elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. My father, by the way, I'm fair-skinned. My father was white, of German descent from the mountains of Virginia. My mother is full-blood Hatteras Tuscarora. But getting back to each tribe is different. What you've seen, what you're probably most familiar with, thanks to Hollywood, is the Plains Indians, the Lakota, the Nakota, the Dakota, and the Oshete-Shakoi. They're the ones who wore the full headdresses, and they were the famous horse culture. We had horses too, but nothing like they did. And, actually Europeans brought the horses here. So I won't really be discussing the Sioux people. The English word is Sioux, but they're actually the Oshete-Shakoi. And that means the tribes of the Great Fire, or the Council of the Great Fire. And there's 3 different tribes in the Sioux Nation: the Lakota, the Nakota, and the Dakota. So, and when you, let me just add this because I always do, when you put O in front of Dakota, so you say O Lakota or O Nakota or O Dakota, it means we come in peace. And I always like that. So, just a little thing to throw out there. If any of the guests know anybody that's Sioux or anything, they may want to say O Lakota to them one time. But everything that I will be talking about comes from my tribe, and tribes are very individual in what they've evolved into. That we've always been, a tribe is a unique sovereign entity. We're all different. I would say we're much more different than even, when you go to Kentucky and then you go down to Texas or up to New York State, I'd say we're more different than that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I do want to let people know that there will be a certain point within our discussion when we will open up for questions. Meanwhile, if you would like to add any questions that you have as JoJo does her presentation and discusses what she has to share with us tonight, please put it in the chat and we will do our best to answer each and every one of those questions.
Absolutely.
So JoJo, we would love to hear your story about what it was like growing up, focusing on those values, focusing on those rituals that are so important to you. And she's provided us with some pictures to enhance her talk. And so we're going to begin with a description of what a tribe is. And I'm going to share the screen now. Okay.
So we're seeing Billy again.
Right. Okay. So
There
here
we
we
go.
go, starting with what is a tribe? So take it away, JoJo.
Okay, what is a tribe? And what you see on the screen, the man in the fedora, the dark-skinned man in the fedora was my granddaddy. And the obviously very Sioux-looking man there, actually he was Ojibwe, but he's dressed like a Sioux there, is Dennis Banks, head of AIM. And I thought the best place to start is the beginning. And in the United States, to be a legal tribe, you have to be federally recognized. You don't just say you're a tribe. And even if you're not federally recognized, other tribes want you to be acknowledged by the government and by each other. And that's through federal recognition. And it's not easy to obtain at all. There's 574 federally recognized tribes in this country. And mine, the Hatteras Tuscarora, we achieved our federal recognition in 1936. We were still a tribe before then, don't get me wrong, with all the bells and whistles. But to achieve a political status as a tribe in this country, you're not politically a tribe unless you're federally recognized, which means basically you're put on the magic list in Washington. You're number 321 or whatever. And then the government owes a standard or a duty of care to your tribe. And why does the government owe this to a tribe? Because the tribe gave up something to the American government and the American people, and that was land. And in exchange for that land, the American government promised basically three things, whether you had a treaty or not. Education, they promised education, health, care, and to help us establish a new form of government, because they didn't like our old form. They did not like the way we governed ourselves. So we said, we're going to be more like you. And so anyway, we start out with what is a tribe, and you have 574, and they're all very different. Mine's an IRA tribe, which means it was established later under a law called the Indian Reorganization Act. We have our own constitution. We could even establish our own religion if we want. And we're a limited sovereign though, because we cannot have an army. We can't do that in America. But pretty much anything a state can do, a tribe can do. Now, we didn't always do that though, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Why don't we flip to the next one? Okay, so my tribe had to pick out a name. And what we ended up going with, we're an amalgamation of 5 or 6 tribes. We really don't know historically how many mixes, because we're East Coast. So we assimilated, you figure 500 to 1,000 years before our Sioux brothers and sisters and our Cheyenne and Pawnees. They still have all their languages intact, or not all of them, but they're far ahead of the East Coast tribes. We're losing all of that daily. I mean, daily. So what you see here is we voted on a name, and we couldn't decide which tribe should represent us, like the Hatteras Tuscarora or the Cheraw, because Cheraw's in our union also. So we named it after the river. We all live along the Lumber River. So we are called the Lumbee, and that's the way you pronounce it. You'll hear Southerners say Lumbee, but it's Lumbee. And what you see here is a group of girls. I took this shot about 3 or 4 years ago with little Lumbee girls swimming and bathing in the water. And I did that as a girl. And you have a chaperone that takes you out there, and the girls swim in one part of the river, and the boys and the men swim in another part of the river. And that's pretty much maintained, unless you go swimming as a family. But that rarely happens. Even when families go, the men go off to themselves, and the women swim with the women in the river. So this is one example of some girls swimming in the river. Brings back good memories.
All right, thank you.
Okay. I love this picture. I'm so glad we included it. This would be my it's my grandfather's grandmother, Dalcidi. And my great uncle Colton, my great aunt Rossetti, that's in the white dress on the left. And the reason I bring her up, I had a relationship with her my whole life. She did not pass away until I was in law school. She lived to be quite old. We have longevity in my immediate family. And so this group that you're looking at, this picture, we know it was like taken circa 1900s. Right, right at the beginning, like when we don't know if it was 1800, late 1800s or early 1900s, but we were not federally recognized yet. So we had no power politically. We couldn't vote because the state of North Carolina at that point wouldn't let Indians vote. And we just had no power because we weren't a tribe, so we couldn't go to the BIA and ask for their help or voice any of our concerns as a people. It's interesting to note, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the BIA, I'll call it the BIA probably, I'm used to that. It's under the War Department. And it has been like for years and years when we had the War Department. But I don't think they've ever taken it out. If there's still a War Department, it's still there, but it was under the War Department. So that tells you right there, the inner conflict tribes always faced when trying to really get anything done, and trying to, like when we were trying, even in this picture, we were writing letters to the federal government trying to establish ourselves as a tribe. And you may say, well, weren't you already a tribe? Well, yes, we were more, but we were more like a family tribe. We wanted to be a political tribe, which was more like a state. We wanted those rights. We wanted to be able to go to DC and meet with the president. And he only does that with leaders of federally recognized nations. So that was our goal. And it started back with this group here. Okay, this is Aunt Rossetti as she ages on the left. That was her as a young woman. She never had any children, but she was married. And the woman on the right is my Aunt Rhody. So you've got Rossetti and Rhody. And Aunt Rhody, everybody thinks that she's a Sioux in this picture. She does look a lot like a Sioux, but she's very reflective of what my grandfather's family looked like. My grandfather's family was the only Indians ever recognized, and we'll go through this, I think, with the pictures, because we're an East Coast tribe, because we didn't write and keep records, everything was oral tradition. In the 1930s, when we were actually going to achieve a political status, it was very important to the government to know they were dealing with real Indians, not white people and not Black people and not Hispanic or something else. And how did they achieve this then? Because they weren't going to just take our oral tradition. So they sent anthropologists into our community. 209 Indians applied to be federally recognized as Indians, because we were federally recognized as individuals first and then as a tribe. So out of 209 applicants throughout the community, only 22 were found to be, this is as exact as they could get it, was 1/2 or more. If you reached, or excuse me, more than 1/2. If you were more than 1/2, you were eligible to join the Hatteras Tuscarora and become a member of the tribe. These pictures you see here, that's my grandfather on the right. That's my great grandma, Big Mama. Excuse me, grandfather's on the left, Big Mama's on the right. And you might see underneath 1/2 or more Indian. And then my great grandmother was borderline. That meant they really couldn't determine. She seemed to be 1/2 or more. They weren't really sure. So they let borderline cases into the tribe. Now, these are the only pictures most of my people ever had of themselves, was when the government, there's my uncles, my great uncles, excuse me, my great uncles, Paul and Jesse. And these are their government application pictures that these were attached to an application which included hair samples, blood samples, and they measured every single joint on their body that went like, my grandfather would hold up his hand, and every like digit, every bone they measured and wrote down. They wet their hair and saw how long it would take to dry. Hair was very important to Carl Seltzer, the lead anthropologist from Harvard. It was very important to Carl because Carl thought that hair would tell whether you had some hidden, and this was his word, some hidden Negroid blood in you. And they had the 1-drop rule. If you were found to have white blood, that was okay. But if that 1/2 or more was based on, you know, if it was diluted by any Negroid blood, you were automatically disqualified from the testing. So, you know, you can be mixed, and that's my mother's grandmother. Dulcina,
yeah. I found it really interesting when you were sharing this with me, how they had to have so many different tests in order to be truly identified and to be able to be part of a tribe.
Yes, but and you know that was colonization's rule, not ours. Now we went much more on a kinship basis, you know, a family kinship. My grandfather was very open to people, like, you know, when you showed the slide of Billy Tyak, Chief Billy Tyak, his father came and lived among our people, Chief Turkey Tyak. He lived among our people for quite a while because he was courting my grandfather's cousin Martha. And actually, so Chief Turkey ended up with 2 families at different times, of course, but his sister is my cousin. And but getting back to kinship, my grandfather wholeheartedly accepted this Piscataway from, as they called it, up the road, Hahawaquast, up the good road. So it was the government that mandated to us who was going to be in our tribe and who was not. Now that is no longer the way it is. Now, once you are a tribe, you get to adopt in whoever you want, but you have to be federally recognized first. Once you get the magic recognition once you get on the piece of paper that says, I'm a tribe and the United States has a relationship with me, then you get to include whoever, you get to define your own members. You define them, but here's the really, now that we're seeing the advent of casinos, Jeri, see, when we were all poor, we were just all poor together. Nobody really thought about, well, what if somebody excludes us one day? What if somebody says you can't be a member anymore? That wasn't even thought of unless you murdered somebody or something, or, you know, as a form of resolution to solve a problem. They would exclude people for like 2 years, 1 year. A lot of tribes still do that. So anyway, nobody even thought about that. But now with the advent of casinos and the payout dividends that some tribes get, they want to, it's greed. They want to make a smaller membership so their payouts are larger, and they find the silliest reasons to exclude people whose family, whose lineage is very, you know, just obviously they're a tribal member. So, but that's an issue now, is not only who can be in your tribe, but hey, we don't want them in anymore. And they have the power to do that. And there's no recourse at all. The courts leave tribes alone. And I do support that. Because if we're going to be a sovereign, we have to learn how to govern ourselves. We have to learn how to police ourselves, for lack of a better term. And we just have to learn how to do these things ourselves, and be, we're going to fall along the way and trip up. And this is definitely where we're tripping up, is allowing greed to be such a factor and say that we're going to exclude people and ostracize them from our tribes so we get a bigger dividend. And I think the key to that is education and spirituality. And I'm really hoping, I know my people are really strong spiritual people, And I'm really praying and hoping that this issue, which has just arisen like in the last 15 years, that it resolves, that we see that this is not our way. And excuse me for saying that, this is a colonizer way, and we're not going to do this. We're not going to do this. Okay, so that's where we are on that. What's the next slide, Jeri?
So throughout generations, survival has always been something that has been a challenge for your people. And so these are some of the ways that people were able to survive. So maybe if you could elaborate a little bit on those.
Sure. Yeah, these are great pictures. On the right, there is my big mama's sister. That's either Lillian or Lillian. There was Lillian, there was Leanna. I think that's Leanna, and she's making cornmeal on a stone. And she takes another stone and beats it. And then on the left, that is, his name was Ralph. We called him Chief. Now, this is interesting about my family and my tribe. This is, again, before we were recognized. And we were recognized in 1938. Terminated in 56, we'll get to that, and then re-recognized in 78. But anyway, there is Pikey with his lovely wife, and they were putting in tobacco. And so tobacco, corn, and cotton were our main crops and how we lived. That's really how we survived. That's Big Papa. It's not, a lot of families had Big Mama and Big Papa. Those were just local, I guess, colloquialisms that we called our great grandparents. If they had a lot of children and a lot of people underneath them, if they had reached that level of eldership, of being an elder, you called them Big Mama and Big Papa, or you called them Big Daddy and Big Mama. I mean, it might sound kind of corny, but we really did do that. And we still do. This is Big Papa, and what he's doing, we live near a river, but we also live near the ocean. And I'm not a fisherman, but I know that's a carp. And it was so big, he's cleaning it with a hoe. And my grandfather used to clean fish that they would go down to the ocean and fish a bunch of the Lumbee men with Tuscarora, and they would come back with enormous fish. And my grandmother would refuse to cook them in the house because she said it smelled up the house. And they would, have a pit outside. And I loved it as a child. It was something we did usually on a Friday night or a Saturday night. And we'd have a fish fry. And the men would, take care of dealing with the pit, but the women would do the cooking. Yeah, a lot of white families or non-Indian families will say that the man cooks out. But that didn't happen in the Tuscarora clan. No, the women did all the cooking in and out. He's holding in his hand. He's strung a string of tobacco. There's Big Papa again. Yeah, we want to go forward. Yeah, there you go. There once again is, I didn't finish telling you, this is cousin Ralph. We called him Pikey. He called himself Chief Ralph because he went to some college. And I once asked my grandfather, but he's loading tobacco to take to the market to sell. And they came on sticks like that. And actually, Jeri, when I was a little girl, I love that I was born when I was born, because I was born and I got to stand on the shoulders of my elders and go to law school and do things that I couldn't have done if I was born in my mother's day. But I still got to take part in like stringing tobacco, and we called it putting in tobacco. And every in harvest season, when it hit a certain point in the fall, you would put in tobacco every week, like once a week. And the children, there was something for everybody to do. The little girls handed, that means they stood beside an older lady who strung on the pole that you see. Actually, it's a stick, a tobacco stick. And the ladies would string. That was a really hard job. I never could do it. So I handed to her. Little boys hung in the barn. They would take the sticks and hang in the barn and clean the leaves up that fell, because every leaf, we were reminded, every leaf was a golden leaf because you got money for it at the tobacco market. And but anyway, yeah, I enjoyed so much putting in tobacco. But let me get back with Chief, my cousin, the chief here. I was very close to my grandfather, and he lived to see me finish law school. He lived, we weren't sure how old he was, but he was well into his 90s. And I asked him all sort of questions growing up. And but I asked him one time, why is Ralph the chief? Why aren't you the chief? Because you're the oldest. And he said, well, he says, I never really cared about being a chief. And it seems to mean so much to cousin Ralph. He said, JoJo, let's let him be the chief. What do you think? And I was like, okay, he can be the chief. But that was really something I thought that was, I've always remembered it, because words are words, you know, and yes, they do have power. But my grandfather understood even back then that it meant more to keep the peace and the harmony in the family. And Ralph, cousin Pikey, or Ralph, had such a strong personality that I think my grandfather saw that the most important thing was pick your battles, keep the peace. If he wants to call himself the chief, let's let him call himself the chief. But there was a time when the men came from Washington that my grandfather had to remind cousin Ralph, don't introduce yourself as the chief. We're a group of, we're a tribe, and we're going to present the elders together. And cousin Ralph agreed to that.
And so restoratively, you were addressing some of the issues that were within your own tribe, and always talking about ways for peace. You know, what I've heard you say so many times is how important community is, how important it is to build in peace. And with rituals being so important, you shared with me the rituals of weddings. So if you would kind of briefly go through that, please.
Yeah, I'll try and be briefer. I know I'm long-winded. Okay, smudge it. Smudging is really important across. Now, that's one thing I'll say. Every tribe's different. We all have different rituals, different languages, different religions, different creation stories. Every tribe I know smudges. What's smudging, if you're not familiar with it, it's taking like sage or sweetgrass, whatever plant that your tribe or your family enjoys smudging with, because each has a different smell. And before I used to do it every day. You light it and you keep it on the coffee table. And it looks just like the picture, and you immerse yourself in the smoke. And you don't come out smelling like cigarette smoke. You don't come out smelling like fire pit smoke. It's a very nice smell. And it dissipates quite rapidly. And now what they have found, though, Jeri, I think you and I discussed this briefly, they're finding that the properties that are in some of the grasses we smudge with, they actually were effective in killing off bacterias. I don't know about viruses, but I know bacterias, that they were effective in keeping us healthy. And the old people told us that because it's good for you, but we didn't know scientifically, why, and now we do. So
right,
what we see here is before you ever enter a sacred circle, we're gonna see a wedding, we smudge. There you go. Now, this is my little cousin, and my son was getting married that day in a traditional Eastern woodlands wedding. It was the first one in our tribe in many, many years, because the young people seem to think if they put on an Indian costume or regalia, that they're having a traditional wedding. So the man in the blue there, that's Dennis Banks with the hat on. He founded the American Indian movement. And he and Russell Means, a few of you may recognize the name Dennis Banks or Russell Means. They testified before Congress in the 70s. They took over the BIA. They took over Wounded Knee and occupied it. Custer Courthouse. Dennis actually pulled time for the riot at Custer Courthouse. And what they did, though, they assisted the tribes in They founded it in 1968, but through the 70s, they gave us our pride back. They told us it was okay to for the men to grow braids again, their hair, and to braid it. And yeah, the men responded, and it gave children, all of a sudden, we were proud to be Indian. And I've heard through years of my mother and my grandfather instilling it in me, the American Indian movement, we owe so much to these giants. We really thought of them as giants whose shoulders we stand upon. That's what I was always told. Oh, so what we're doing here is, she was a little girl in the wedding. She's a little afraid to be smudged. It was her first wedding. It was one of her first ceremonies that she'll do throughout her life. And she had not been smudged before. And so she asked me if I would hold her, and which I wanted to, because it can be intimidating. You see something that's lit on fire, then it's smoking and it's coming towards you. So when you're a child, it can be kind of intimidating. So we got her smudged and into the sacred circle so she could just be cute and stand there for the wedding, which I would say this right now, the elder men, they just did not get the whole concept of what a flower girl is. They were so upset that I let this child in the sacred circle. And I was like, no, she's coming in. They're like, well, then she must be smudged. And I'm like, okay. But flower girl was not part of the ancient tradition.
So, and being smudged is part of the spirituality that is so important within your group,
yes,
within your tribe.
And as you'll see here in this picture, it's dominated by men. The only women in the circle, there was Katie the bride, who was a nice Irish Catholic girl who agreed to be married in our traditional way. And that meant so much to me. My son, he already knew he had to do it, but I had to have her cooperation, of course. And her family, we had it, in the middle of nowhere in North Carolina here, and she had 36 people come in for that wedding. And that just, wow, talk about restorative justice. That really made not just me feel good. There was probably about 65, 70 Indians there. And they couldn't believe that these white people, because most of them were white. I think they were all white that day, flew in, drove in, however they could get there, and paid for a hotel room. There's only one hotel in town, and attended our little wedding that turned into rather a big event. And anyway, so what you see in this picture, let me just mention real quick. I've got my arm around my son, who's got a gray blanket on his shoulders. Now, Katie had already had hers burned at this point. We're in the sacred circle. There's a sacred fire you'll see in a minute. Anyway, I take my job as the mother. This is my big moment. I remove the blanket that is a dark color. It's a dark color because it represents, it's symbolic of his impurities. Anything he's done up until this moment in his life, he is going to be washed away. When I put the fire in, or I put the blanket into the fire and it burns. And then you'll see as we go on, yes, I place a white blanket. I don't do it, the men do. The white blanket around both their shoulders, and they're tied together, the two of them, and they're walking sticks. They each had a walking stick made for them. It's very expensive to have a traditional wedding. And the family, the groom's family is responsible for payment of the regalia of everything. So, and you have to go to the traditional people to make these things. Not everybody knows how to do it. So you have to find people that know how to make traditional regalia, how to pray over it. Just how to make the right moccasins. And so I've got that circled there. So you could see they're bound together, and their walking sticks are now bound together. And here's the object. Once they're united, and the ceremony took about an hour and 30 minutes, 35 minutes. Okay, now the last part of the ceremony, the bride and the groom get to walk around the sacred fire as many times as they can while entertaining the the guests who are chanting, and that's traditionally, you know, okay. So as long as you can keep the wedding chant going, you want to march around that fire, which is inside the circle, and the circle's rather big, as many times as you can, because that represents how many years you're going to be married. And I think they only made it around about 7 times because it was a really wide circle. I looked at Dennis, I said, next time we make the circle smaller. But it was a wonderful day. It was probably in my life, really one of the best days I've had thus far.
So what I would like to move on to is your whole life, all of your rituals, all of that was having in history, all that was happening within your culture helped you to become an activist from an early age.
Oh, yes, yes.
So your activism has been incredibly important in the past. It is now, and I'm sure it will be into the future. So if you could address your activism a little bit.
Sure, yeah. I think I grew up just thinking, and my father, I really have to give acknowledgement to my father, who was a white man from the mountains of from Virginia, who met my mother and married her when it was illegal to marry a non-white in Virginia. This was before Loving v. Virginia had come through the Supreme Court, and it was just a few years before. And anyway, I grew up thinking that all kids go to marches and protests. We were very much, because AIM helped us get our federal recognition. I don't know, my grandfather became very involved with AIM, American Indian Movement. It wasn't a military, it started out as a spiritual organization. It did become more militant as it went along, because of, I'm not going to say it was, but it wasn't, they reacted. If the government held guns on them, then they went and got their guns. Now, their guns weren't tanks and on top of tanks, and they weren't, you know, automatic weapons. These were hunting rifles probably and things like that. Well, not probably, they were. But the point is, AIM said, you're not going to push us around anymore. And this is, okay, I was there. The occupation of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and this was November of 1972. And I was there with my grandfather, and he was there with AIM, and it was called the Trail of Broken Treaties. And we did not go over there with the intent to occupy or take over and kind of demolish the BIA. A lot of damage was done, property damage. We were there to present a paper. I think it was a 12 or 18 point paper. And a lot of miscommunication happened. We didn't have places to stay. It was the Nixon administration, according to Mr. Means and Dennis Banks, they had lied to them. And they kind of didn't have anywhere to go, with about 500 Indians from out west and in the south and from the north. They had all caravanned there. We had no place to stay, because the accommodations that were supposed to be made for us were not made. So we really had no place to stay. And so we decided, or I didn't decide, they took a vote. All of the adults in the room took a vote, and it was voted that we would just stay at the BIA. And so we ended up occupying it for the next 7 days. They did bring in federal marshals, and the SWAT team was there and the whole bit. And we used, our main weapon was electric typewriters. They would throw typewriters out the window at SWAT teams coming up the side of the building. I will never forget that. So, but that wasn't the only, you know, march I was in, or most of mine were local. I was 8 years old then. So I was mainly in school back then, but in the summers, we marched and we protested, and a lot of ours was on the Board of Education down here, a state park that charged us to get in, that was on our land, things like that. But I just thought, really, that all kids kind of marched at some point for something, but it does instill in you a sense like, you know, that we all have a responsibility to act, not just to be, not.
So JoJo, you just, if you would unmute yourself, please. Thank you. You're good.
Yeah. Are you there?
Oh, we're there.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, my screen went blank. Somebody tried to call and I declined it, of course. Anyway, so I did grow up with that sense though of even now when I hear about things or see something like the MMIW, missing murdered Indigenous women, I've really become active in that. I'm on the committee for the International Leonard Peltier Defense Committee. He's a Native American political prisoner. So I do feel a sense of duty and I wish more people felt that way, I guess.
And so
this is Standing Rock.
Right. So some of your activities, your activism has led to working with Dennis Banks at Standing Rock and with Leonard, who is a person who it is believed by even the United Nations was unjustly incarcerated. And that has led into a lot of your current activism. What I'd like to do, because our time is going by quickly, is now let us move into some questions that people might have, and then we can always come back to your activism. But
Sure.
At this point, I'm going to stop sharing the screen. And I know we have a couple of questions that have been asked, so I'd like to address those. One of the questions is, what laws are applied when a non-Native American person is on your land?
Well, okay, that's a great question. And it really does depend on what offense. I think that they're getting at like if they do something wrong. It depends on how severe the offense is. There's the Major Crimes Act, the feds have to come in for that. We do, actually the Supreme Court just gave us back jurisdiction over non-Indians for misdemeanors, but we can't put you in jail. We can't put you in jail. We can fine you and we can escort you to the edge and tell you to get off of our land. Now, what we can do also, we can hold you now, which we used to couldn't do, hold you until the state or the federal authorities get there. We used to have no power to do any of this. Well, we had it, then they took it away. But usually the feds handle major crimes. It's called the Major Crimes Act. So if there's a rape or murder, you call in the federal authorities and they come in. And you know, this might sound like it's really easily done, but it's not. Sometimes it takes them weeks to get there. And when you have a rape that just occurred, you know, evidence gets lost, memories get fuzzy. So it is a problem. And then there's the state. We can always defer our power to the state, but tribes we do not like to do that.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, do you have your own language and is there a script?
Well, we do have our own language. This is the sad part. We've only got about probably now 6 fluent speakers in Tuscarora or Scarara. That's the real way you pronounce it, is Scarara. And it means hemp people or people of the hemp, because we used hemp cloth. So there's only, I think, 6 to 10, and they're on the reservation. I'm Hatteras Tuscarora, and I always distinguish that because the Tuscarora War was fought between 1711 and 1715 in the state of North Carolina. Those Tuscarora who chose then at the end of that war to go to the reservation because they wanted us out of North Carolina then. They wanted us out. But my people did not choose to do that. We went and hid in the swamps of the Lumbee River of Robeson County. And that's really how we evolved to be here. So we do have our language, like I say hello, Shawan. It's a greeting. It doesn't mean hello. It's just, there's no really equivalent for it. When you meet somebody, it's just, and there's not a whole bunch of words for hello. There's one greeting, Shawan. And then there's, I do say Nyawe. Nyawe is thank you. And then Une is simply, there's no goodbye. That's for, I will see you again, is Une. And you know what, I was very embarrassed that I didn't know when I went out west. But I was surprised they didn't know either. I thought, I mean, the older ones do, but they lost a lot of their language in residential and boarding schools. And I was very embarrassed that I didn't know my language and that I felt funny saying that I only know like a handful of words, like 15 words, and I know a couple sentences. And Mr. Banks Dennis was the one who told me. He says, JoJo, if you only know 2 words, use them. He says, use them anytime you can. He says, because he said, your ancestors only understand that language. He said, and so when you speak in those words, they hear you. He said, and every time they hear you, they smile because they know you're trying. And that's what I think of. And so I don't feel as self-conscious anymore. But I spent my whole life, I wasted my whole life not practicing my language because I felt silly saying it because I couldn't pronounce words right.
So along that line, we have another question. Have any of your original languages survived colonization and American education? And if yes, how are they kept alive?
Okay, you have like language, actually language institutes. The Sioux have done a fabulous job. So many more tribes than you think have preserved their languages. And we've had interested, I apologize if I offend anybody by saying white, because I know white is just as vague a term as saying Indian or brown. But honestly, that's what the majority of Indians call the English or the colonizers. We actually call them colonizers, but we're taught from a young age not to say that in public. So your mom kind of nudges you and says, just say the white people then. So anyway, but getting back to, it's actually been a lot of educated English people or non-Indians who have preserved our languages for us. In the Cornell, Dartmouth, the Ivy Leagues have done a wonderful job with it. And we have a lot of times we have formed partnerships about the languages. And so they more than you think survived. And even if you don't speak a whole lot, I would say every like Lumbee that you meet or Hatteras Tuscarora, they know a few words. They know a few words to say.
So what is your population size?
Okay, this is a hard question.
And I thought it was going to be so easy.
No, because in 1938, when we were officially recognized, there was 22 of us. Now, there was way more, but only 22 could pass the rigorous race tests, so we did not keep good records because my tribe, my people, the Hatteras Tuscarora could not read or write real well. Now, once you went across the bridge into town, there was more people of Chiraw descent.
No, she's not saying.
And the Chiraw descent people, they were just more educated across the river. The Hatteras Tuscarora stayed to themselves, and we're a tribe within a tribe. That's why I always say it's a little complicated because I'm Lumbee, but I'm Hatteras Tuscarora by blood. But I chose it. You could only be a member of one tribe in North Carolina, or not North Carolina, but I should say Robeson County. The tribes around here have a rule. Now, out west, if your mother is Chippewa and your father is Lakota, a lot of tribes let you join both or enroll in both. They won't let you do that here. So when I became a certain age, actually, I waited to enroll with a tribe. I was almost 50. I'm 57 now. I took it very seriously because my grandfather made me promise not to enroll with Lumbee. He says, you're Hatteras Tuscarora. But Jeri, I had grown away from my cousins and people on the Brooks settlement by this point. I was a professional, and I weighed a lot of factors, but I thought the best decision for me and my son was to join with the Lumbee for political reasons. As well, I knew I had relations in there too. I do have relatives there. I wouldn't have, and I did qualified. I qualified for either Lumbee or Tuscarora, but not for both. Oh,
Okay.
Let me just say this. Notice I said for Tuscarora or Lumbee, but not both. The Hatteras Tuscarora had died out by then. The actual Hatteras Tuscarora. So anyway, I could have went with Tuscarora or Lumbee.
So is there a Hollywood film that represents your people well that you can think of?
No, no. I like Dances with Wolves, but I will tell you, as a female, I kind of thought it was so convenient that there happened to be a non-native woman there for him to be with. Like, I kind of thought, well, why couldn't he, I just thought that was such a coincidence that they didn't need to do it. Should have been more realistic. Now, I will tell you something that's very popular with our young people. There is now something on, I don't know if it's Hulu or what, because I don't watch television, I really don't, called Reservation Dogs. I don't know if anybody's watched it, but the young people, and even people my age, going nuts for it. They say it's so realistic, it depicts modern day reservations just the way they are. So I need to watch an episode, but
Okay.
if you're interested, I would try Reservation Dogs.
Okay, thank you. So is it true that Columbus called your people Indians because he thought he had landed in India?
Okay, I don't think so. I go with Russell Means there. Russell Means of the American Indian Movement said he fully embraced being Indian. That was a lie about, because I'm not a historian. I was actually talking with somebody about this last night on social media, that it was a younger girl. And she said, she didn't want to be called an Indian because Columbus, the old story. But according to Russell Means, who did some work on it, he did research on it. He said that it came from that Columbus did call us, not Indians, but Indios or something. And what it meant was of God, that these people are of God, because he was so impressed with us. Now, I don't know the exact resource to give somebody, but I would look it up now. I could send you, though, the tape of Russell saying it, because he makes a big speech about it. He lectured at a lot of universities. He spoke before Congress several times, but that was his theory. I mean, that was his, not theory, but that is what he espoused, was that it came from a different place. It wasn't a negative term. Columbus called us that, and that there was, even India back then didn't exist as India. So why would he call us Indians?
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to kind of start to focus on restorative justice, and we have a couple of questions along that line. You and I have talked for several months now about doing the land acknowledgement statements. So this question is our current practice of Indigenous land acknowledgement during training sessions enough? Do we need to apologize for the use of the term?
No, I don't think so. I think I just appreciate non-Indians trying, meeting us halfway and actually saying, look, we get it that you were here before us, and we really do. I don't think that a lot of non-Indians realize. My father said there was so much he didn't get when he married my mother as a white person, that like he couldn't believe how serious her family was about being stewards of the land, that they saw this as their job. And my father once asked, my grandfather's name was Henry, and he said, Henry, he said, all your boys served in the military. you know, and my grandfather said, Joe, because my dad's name was Joe. He said, it's my one big regret that I didn't serve in the military. And he said, but after the way I'm confused, after the way the government treated your people, why do your people serve in the military in such large numbers? Why would you send your sons there? And Granddaddy looked at him and said, and my father shared this with me, said, Granddaddy looked at him and said, because this is our land. He said, I don't want anything to happen to it. He said, this is our land, Joe. He says, we let you live here, but this is our land. So, you know, they actually see this as still their land to be tended to and cared for and looked after.
So what do you suggest for meaningful criminal justice activism and reform? What can we do? What can we do?
Say it again. Oh, for reform in our current justice system? I'm missing the, say that again.
What do you suggest for meaningful criminal justice activism and reform? And Naomi, that was your question. You may want to unmute yourself and elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yeah, so you had just mentioned that I guess some people had been incarcerated kind of unjustly. So that seemed maybe like it was a case in the past. I don't know if you had more information on that, either for current cases or for past ones.
Well, if you're asking, okay, Leonard was incarcerated back in the 70s. And we do look upon him as a Native American political prisoner. And if you're, so what we do, we raise awareness through marches, a lot of marches. That's our main thing. And at different events, lectures, we're trying to bring Leonard's name back into American culture like it was in the 70s. Like in the 70s, a lot of non-Indian people knew the name Leonard Peltier. And also the United Nations, Amnesty International, they're great helps. When you're a marginalized group of people or a people without a formal government, they have different committees like on the UN and things that can help you. And so we found that a great resource. So that's who we work with. We're working with the UN, we're working with Amnesty International, and with European countries. Okay, here's what gets me. Do you know, like, far more Europeans know the word or the name, they recognize, there's name recognition of Leonard Peltier. Like, I'd say 90% more than there is here in this country. Even with our young people, this breaks my heart. I grew up knowing exactly who Leonard was. You didn't even have to say in an Indian home. You didn't have to say Leonard Peltier. You would just say, and we ask you whether you called him God or creator or whatever you called him, Great Spirit, whatever it was. You prayed for Leonard. Many families did, not everybody, or your church did, or you did it in ceremony. But you'd say, and we remember our brother Leonard. And you just knew who he was. Now the younger generation, that's where I came in. I got on TikTok, and I'm bringing in a new generation to be interested in the American Indian movement. And Leonard was part of the American Indian movement. And they're learning who Leonard was. And I'm hoping they're going to get on board with us. I've only been doing it like 6 months. Does that answer your question? If not, I'll try better, but.
No, that was awesome. I am a young person that was also, Googling for the first time who he is. So thank you so much for getting me in the loop. Thank you.
No, get the word out there. Read a story. If you have any questions, Jeri knows how to get in touch with me.
So thank you. So as children and their children grow up, there can be a tendency to forget values, rituals, and practices. Those practices that are related to your cultural roots that are so deeply. What are some of the challenges that are being faced that are related to traditional generation versus the contemporary generation?
Oh, we talked about this, Jeri. Respect for your elders, number one. And I know they said that back in the Roman days, didn't they? There's some quote about it, about how the kids, you know, are being ruined and everything, and everybody thinks it's going to be a quote from yesterday, and it turned out to be some in the Middle Ages quote. We're having the same problem. Our young people, natives, are saying crazy things to us. And now that it's my turn to be an elder, you bet, like, I'm like in there saying, no, I'm not going to earn it. I've earned it. You're going to respect me. It's our way. And we're shocked. We're blaming it on social media, me and my chatty aunties. I'm an auntie. I'm not, and I call them niece and nephew. And they're supposed to defer, you know, as long as I couldn't tell them to do anything, no. But there's a certain amount of respect you're raised with that you just defer to your aunties over your uncles. We're matriarchal. And they're not doing it. They're saying things like, I don't really know you. Well, you know what? I didn't know half the old ladies who yelled at me when I was growing up, but I listened to them.
So we talked a little bit about how water protectors and protesters and terminology, and how
Right.
the contemporary generation seems to be moving forward, trying to do the rituals, trying to keep the cultural roots without knowing what they're doing and the impact that that's having.
Yeah, well, I mean, it follows along with respect. I mean, you have to listen to your elders if you want to grow and evolve as a human being. And like one of them called somebody the other day a player. And the elder said back, you know, I wasn't born to be a player. I was born to be a human being. And that's what I am. You know, you don't understand the struggle at all, young person. Because you don't even know the terminology. And they don't want to wait, you know. I mean, like everything else in life, it's immediate, fast food kind of world we live in. They want to go to like when I went to Standing Rock 6 years ago, I would have never presumed to get out of bed and go out into the field and say, I'm a water protector, welcome me. No, you earn that. And slowly over time, older people would say, I'd like you to meet JoJo, she's an activist. And that's when I took on the term activist. I didn't call myself an activist. It was given to me. And that's the way we do it. And water protector, that's for the media to call me a water protector when I'm there. And my elders, I don't walk out and tell the media, talk to me, I'm a water protector. But that's the kind of thing, because, you know, they're missing the message that these are things you earn, you struggle for. And we do that in our culture. We symbolize, you know, your gifted eagle feathers. It can fall off an eagle in the sky and you go pick it up. It's not going to do you any good. But when you work for it or you earn it and it's given to you in ceremony, all of a sudden it's something powerful that you can carry around as medicine. Yeah. So that's the way we believe.
So I think all of us can agree that there are a number of current injustices that are ongoing with Native Americans right now. What would you consider one or two of the greatest current injustices?
That's easy for me. Recognition. We talked a lot about federal recognition. My tribe, the Lumbee, is the largest tribe east of the Mississippi. And we've been seeking federal recognition since the 1800s. And we got it in 1956, the Lumbee did. Now, this is different from the Hatteras Tuscarora. We received it in 1956, but it was the termination era. If you're a historian, that's the time of terminating tribes. Actually Nixon was responsible for bringing tribes back to life. But anyway, the same day they recognized us, part of Congress said, okay, we're going to recognize them as an Indian tribe, but we're not going to give them any legal benefits as a tribe. I mean, that's what the law says. It's the Lumbee Act of 1956. So my problem is with at the very core of the way they say who is a tribe and who is not. I have a problem with that. If you can prove it should not cost a tribe. The average is about $25 to $35 million to get recognition. And that should have never happened. But that's the current status.
So when you think about the harm that has been caused, what might help? What might we do to help restore and bring about some restorative justice to help reduce that harm? We can't change it all, but what can we do from this day forward to move in a direction that helps to reduce that harm and to begin to acknowledge so many wrongs that have occurred over the past?
I'll tell you what goes a long way is recognize that we're still here. That's our biggest thing. We feel so left out of the dialogue, out of political dialogue. We really feel marginalized. We don't think people really pay attention to what we say. And if they do, I think most of us feel like, do they really hear us? Or are we kind of like the kid sister or the kid brother who you're just being nice to because you're kind of mean to them most of the time? So we're still here. And I would say just okay, let me give you a perfect example. I know we don't have much time. The MMIW. I don't know how many of you are aware of what MMIW is. And if you're not aware of it, that just goes to show you don't listen to us because we've been hollering about it for 20 years. Anyway, with MMIW, the young woman who was just killed by her boyfriend, Gabby, is Gabby Pitt? I can't think of the last name, but she was found, and it was horrible that she was not brought back to her family alive, but her body was found and she was returned in some form. We don't get that. And they found her within like 2 weeks. And believe me, the Indian community has been on all over social media. We've been talking about it, this poor girl, Gabby, because it touches us. Because almost every Indian family that you know has been touched by a missing or murdered Indigenous woman. That's what MMIW stands for, missing and murdered Indigenous women. We have such a high number of them. So we were praying for this girl that she'd be brought home okay, but we were stunned that they found her at all because our women don't get found. We don't get looked for. They don't look for our women. These are, our daughters and our sisters. And we feel like if they could find Gabby for her family, why can't they find our girls for our families? Because it happens every day on reservations, every day. I'm not exaggerating that. Deb Haaland, Secretary of Department of Interior, is she's supposed to be getting together a program about this to work on it. I've got to give Trump credit. President Trump's the only president that ever addressed it. He put a committee together for it. I know when he went out of office, I don't know what happened to that committee, but he did put together a committee, but a lot of natives were Democrats and rejected the committee or said negative things about them based on that. Not me, because I worked really in that issue a lot. So look, he was listening. So I was happy.
So, and I know when we first started talking about land acknowledgement statements, one of the things that you said was so important was to name the tribes. And by naming the tribe, we were offering specific recognition. And so we at DC Peace Team have been doing that. We've also, I didn't do it tonight, but we often ask people to list in the chat the tribe or the area that they're representing to try to bring some restorative justice from that standpoint. Raj, you have been waiting patiently to ask a question. I'm now to your question, and I don't know what it is.
Yeah, hi, JoJo. This is Raj. Maybe this is the first time for me talking to somebody that belongs to a Native American tribe. I have a couple of questions. One is, what kind of restorative justice practices do you guys have in your communities? And the second one is, I think I forgot the second one. I will get back to you. Thank you.
Okay. So Jeri, can you restate the question for me?
So he's wanting to know what my question to you for the last 3 days, what are the restorative justice practices that are going on? And one of the things that I learned is terminology, the wording is important, and the restorative justice, and then you can answer or add to that. I turned out to be that where restorative justice was being addressed was through your tribal courts, which we have not had time to get into tonight, and explaining how you are trying to get back as a nation of different tribes to the peacemaking, that you have become so Americanized that you have, not you personally, but you have moved into the punishment rather than the restorative part. So I'll let you take over from there. Good question, Raj.
Raj, what we're trying to move towards as young nations, a rebuilding, because we were colonized. And so our values were stripped from us. But as young nations again, as we rebuild, we have tribal courts. So when somebody does something wrong, they go into that tribal court. Now, my court here at Lumbee is very young, but like Navajo, okay, when I was in law school many years ago, I helped them write their constitution and some of their laws and things, their structure. So when we came to the courts, I fought very hard to get their traditional means and ways, their traditional rituals of how did you solve, okay, in the old days, if somebody hurt somebody, killed somebody, whatever, how did you solve it back then? Let's go back to that. And what I found out was that the Navajo way of doing it, the Sioux way of doing it is pretty much the same as the Lumbee used to do it. And that is payment. You make them whole. If somebody's lost somebody, you go address that family. First of all, you address the family. You apologize. You say you're sorry. That's a big deal. It's not like you don't want to, admit any guilt. No, you admit the guilt because you've got to live together as a community. We're related to each other. Usually if somebody kills somebody or something, they're related somehow. And you've got to work this out. It's not like a big city. These tribes, even today, they're small. And like I say, they're all related. It's kinship. We work on kinship rules. So when somebody hurts or harms somebody, you go to the family and you make it whole. And if a life has been lost, who was a farmhand or a breadwinner in the family, you look into making it whole financially. And that used to be, give me some sheep. If you were a Navajo, a herd of sheep or whatever. Now it's would probably be more how much, money would you need or require? And that's really kind of where we're at. We're growing, but we are looking back to our core values to implement them in the tribal system as much as we can. Jeri, if we have time, but I won't do it right because he didn't ask about this. But if we have time, maybe we can go into, like I was telling you about domestic violence, how they don't want to remove the man, but we can do that later.
Right. Okay, so what I would like to suggest now is that any of you, we are at the end of our time at 8:30, and I want to be sensitive to your time commitments. But I also know that Karen Scott still has a question about middle school. The topic you just mentioned is still of interest. And so I would like to do just a brief closing. And then anybody who wants to stay on for additional discussion, we welcome you with open arms to continue this discussion. And so what I would, JoJo, I can't begin to thank you enough.
Oh, sure.
Even tonight, you brought up some things that we had not discussed. And so each and every time we have a conversation, I learn more and more and have a deeper appreciation and a deeper understanding. And so on behalf of DC Peace Team, we thank you for taking this time to share with us tonight. And I would just invite each of you in popcorn style, if any of you would like to offer a word of gratitude or just a short statement of something to share with JoJo. And then after that, we will continue to stay on at least until 9 o'clock. But after that, please feel free, if you have other time restraints, other commitments that you need to go address, please do. So I would just open the floor popcorn style. You can unmute yourself and share something that you would share with JoJo, with DC Peace Team.
Yeah, I have something to share. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, JoJo. One of, I think, the greatest tragedies of our history is just the inaccuracy of the storytelling. Now, that's a human factor, so I'm blaming, but to an extent, right? The story gets told through the eyes of the storyteller, and the storyteller, being a human, is going to come with biases and perspectives and attitudes in history. They're going to taint the story that they tell. It's why I appreciated Raja's question so much about the movies, and because the movies is probably one of the primary avenues for how we see Native Americans, right? Like, because very few of us are actually going out and trying to meet the different people from these tribes and visit these cultures, right? It's just, oh, I saw the movie. And I love Dances with Wolves. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. And I'm so glad that you challenged that one notion of, well, why was it so convenient that a a Native American woman happened to be in this tribe? And I get it, right? Because it's a greater buy-in for non-Native Americans. They see it, the connection, and so they accept it easier and better. But you're right. Why do we make it convenient all the time? My statement of gratitude is just, this has been an amazing session. We began this interview series last week, and last week's speaker was phenomenal. And you just, as far as I'm concerned, took it up a notch. Because to me, it's about these shared lived experiences. That's what our history is. And these stories aren't getting told accurately. I have believed for the longest time that the term Indian came from Columbus because he thought he landed India. And yet I heard not only from you, JoJo, but Raj was from India. It's like, India didn't even exist at that time.
Exactly.
Thank you so freaking much. Like, those are the kind of corrections we need to make. I don't want to preach. I just want to say thank you. Thank you for that, Michelle.
No, thank you, Sal. And see, if I was more confident on my own history lesson, I would have said it just the way you did, because I know India didn't exist then. So how could he have been he was really talking about us, according to Russell Means, in a positive way. He actually kind of liked us. He thought we were cool. And he liked that we were loving.
So thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. This has been very enlightening, and I plan to stay on after the close to hear the rest of what you have to say. So,
Thank you, Gail. So for those of you that are
Hi.
hi.
Hi, everybody. I appreciate your time and your effort and your blatant transparency, because sometimes that's not always encouraged. And I am just grateful that you are that way. And thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Karen.
So later tonight or tomorrow, I will send out an evaluation form, and it would be greatly appreciated if you would complete it. That's how we at DCP's team learn how we might meet your needs, how we might improve, and it just offers us opportunities on ways that we can grow and expand in our own development. So thank you. And now we're just going to keep it open.
Okay.
So Karen, I'm going to go to your question. In middle school education, there are not legitimate texts that are provided by the school districts. Can you suggest where I could look, research for accurate information on your tribe or on other tribes?
Wow. Yes. On like I wrote a book on my tribe, so I'm going to put that right up there. And I wrote something called Alumbeegershom. It's a collection of
Lumbee
all
what?
kinds-
I'm sorry.
Oh yes, Alumbeegershom.
Okay.
And it's Gershom, Gershom.
Gersom. Yep, I got it. Oh, yep, okay.
Shom, Gershom.
SHOM.
There
Great.
you
I
go.
appreciate
You got
that. Yeah.
Okay. But also a good resource is always like the library down here, the University of North Carolina. They can really help you because they have a lot of tribes in the state of North Carolina for East Coast. Now, once you get out to Wisconsin or Minnesota, Minnesota's full of natives. Any university can help you out there. And there's also tribal universities. That's why I like to suggest the University of North Carolina at Pembroke, because
Wait.
it was originally
University of
Uh-huh.
North Carolina at
Pembroke.
where?
Pembroke, just
Yep,
the way
I
it sounds.
gotcha.
Okay.
Yep.
Because it was originally the first college built for Native Americans. It was originally called the Croatan Indian Normal School. And it trained Indians to teach Indian students, to become Indian teachers.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
But they have a huge like
I
Native
appreciate
American
that.
program.
Yeah.
I appreciate your
I appreciate
interest.
that. Thank you so much.
You're
And
very
JoJo
welcome.
also has a video that she shared with me on the boarding schools.
Yeah.
And what I'd heard through school and what I
Okay.
saw in this video were just totally different. And all the abuse that went on in the boarding schools. It's shameful. It's a disgrace.
And you know what? That's I think I really do want to mention that Mr. Banks, who founded the American Indian Movement, and Russell Meanson
Right.
co-founded, but he was a lead orator for it. He became, he and Dennis were the icons of the movement, the media darlings. And they both were products of Indian boarding schools. They had so much anger in them by the time they finished at these boarding schools. Neither one of them graduated. The graduation rate was very low, and people don't know this. If you came out of an Indian boarding school, their curriculum, they did not encourage reading and writing as subjects. It was catered more to be an industrial school, like shoemaking, not even like good trades, like being a plumber or something. No, it was shoemaking for the guys and seamstress work for the girls. That was the two leading things. Now, they did, though, end up teaching Russell Means and Dennis Banks how to read and write pretty well. They didn't go to one of those where it wasn't encouraged, I guess, because they both could read and write very well. They produced two fabulous leaders. But they did that, they didn't mean to do it. Dennis said when he was young, every Saturday night, they indoctrinated them very carefully. Kill the motto was, or the mantra was, kill the Indian, save the man. And every Saturday night, Dennis said, for years, they showed the same one or two movies over and over on the old, it was on a loop. And he said all the Indian children, it was a cowboy Indian Western. And he said, here, da 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 da, they'd come over the mountain, the cavalry would shoot all the Indians. He said, and all the boarding school children would jump up and down and get very excited about it. They didn't want to be Indian anymore. They bought into it. They wanted to be the white cowboy, the sheriff. Oh, and when they
Wow.
got there, the first thing they did, though, they shamed them. They cut their long hair, and you were beaten if you spoke your native tongue. Some kids didn't speak to another human being for a couple of years till they learned their language, English, till they learned English. It was very, it was very abusive.
So
I appreciate your information. Wow.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Oh, okay, thank you. Wow.
So I know that there was another question and I didn't write it down, and I have totally forgotten what it was. Do any of you remember?
About
Yeah.
the domestic violence.
Oh, the domestic violence, yes.
And about what do you want to know about it? Because
Restorative
there's so much
justice.
going
So-
on.
So that you were explaining about how the man is not removed from the
Right.
From the household.
group.
Okay,
Right.
this is how they prefer to see it
So,
done.
yeah.
And it's not how it's done right now. It's the old way. And I
Oh.
wasn't even aware of
Okay.
it. The traditional way was, and I spoke with Dennis, and I used to discuss this. And please keep in mind, he was very aware of how bad domestic violence can get, because his firstborn granddaughter, Rose, was murdered by her white husband. She had 5 children with him. And so he got how bad domestic violence could get, but he still supported not just a blind leave him in the home, but he believed that we did a really bad job. The English justice system American justice system does a really bad job of dealing with domestic violence. That they're treating symptoms instead of really getting at what's eating the person who's causing the violence. So Dennis always thought this was his thing, he got his tribe to actually do this on a pilot program where both partners were intensely interviewed by either a counselor or a psychologist. I'm not sure which one it was. Okay, if they ascertain that drugs or alcohol is what's eating the person, that's really the culprit, then we're not going to just yank him out of the home if he's the breadwinner. We're not going to put him on the street, because tribes don't really have a shelter, and neither does American courts. If you take somebody out of the home who's an alcoholic, and let's say, and a lot of times things get out of hand once or twice or whatever, or 3 times even, I'm not saying that's okay. I'm not apologizing for it. I'm simply saying, let's look at it from a different viewpoint for just a minute. Okay, so if you can get the person treatment, and a counselor or a psychologist has interviewed them and said they're not inherently dangerous unless they drink, or unless they do crack, or unless they do whatever they're doing. So let's get them help, but let's not pull them away from the children, because in our tribes, we do strongly believe that the family unit, and here's the other thing, we believe in the family unit, that it's everything. And we all kind of live together on compounds or settlements. Like my cousin's here with me now. She walked in a few minutes ago. She's a good example. Her father's house is across the field. She can walk to it on the pathway, but she can also go to her brother's. She can also go to her cousins. Hello? We've got, Jeri, a storm is coming up, and I think I've
Okay.
got a power problem.
We can hear you. You're fine. Nope. No, we can still hear you. So come on back in if you can.
She has a power problem.
So JoJo, can you hear me? Oh, she may not be able to. So Raj, I just saw your light come on. Did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. What about waiting for maybe a couple of minutes so
Sure.
that JoJo might be able to join us? Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, if I heard her right, I believe their population size is 22, correct?
I'm sorry. I was looking to see if she had sent me the text. So say that again, please.
Their population size is 22, correct?
Yes, but population size is often difficult to really have a definitive number.
Oh, okay. Because I was wondering if population size is that small, even if it is like 100, let's say, how can they have their own legal system? Because they need people to manage and implement the whole thing, right?
Right. So they have from what I understand, they have their reservations. Which is why trying to maintain as much of their native land as possible is so incredibly important to them, so that they find themselves in a dual situation. One, they are living in the United States of America under those laws. And sometimes the laws that they have within their own tribal system, their own nation, may be similar, may be conflicting, but at the same time, they are trying as a nation to win the respect, the recognition from the federal government, so that when there's the pipeline for oil and gas, when there's a situation with the government wanting to take over part of their land for whatever, you heard her talk about how it's next to impossible to get the kind of notice and attention to have a woman identified that's within their tribe. It's just another indigenous person, it's just another Indian. Where if the person is a white person, let's face it, they're liable to get a lot more publicity. They're more than likely to get a lot more attention. And so, that's part of the injustice, is that they're not being recognized. I'm not sure that totally answers your question, but that's the best I can answer it.
So Jerry, this question is to you. I don't
Okay.
know whether you ever got a chance to attend any of their circles, Native American groups, restorative justice circles. So do you know what percentage of their, roughly speaking, RJ practices have been adapted by the modern RJ system of practices that you people talk about, or you people practice as
So
practitioners?
so from what I understand, some tribes are trying to return to their original roots, where there were the peacemaking circles, where they were actually passing, we talk about in our circles, handing the stick, allowing one person to talk at a time. She gave me an example of where there was a situation at a church where two families were in conflict, and the pastor said, well, let's just come and bring everybody together. And going according to their traditions, they said, no, what we want to do is we will go to each family, so that each family can be heard within their own environment, where food can be offered and food can be shared, so that there is a sense of building community. And so they decided who would go for the first meeting, and then they decided who would go for the second meeting. And that's when they decided upon what restorative justice principles would be occurred. When I first started talking to JoJo about restorative justice, it was like speaking a foreign language. And I have to remind myself that while we talk about Indigenous people being the ones who started the restorative justice circles that we have, It really didn't start in the United States with the Indians or the Native Americans. It started in Australia and New Zealand. And I think sometimes just by the movies, when we look at the peacemaking circles, we think, oh, it got started here in the United States, but restorative justice actually began, from what I understand, in Australia and in New Zealand, and it has come here. We talked a lot about reconnecting, about rehabilitation, about restoration. These are words that were kind of, she had heard them, but not in her tribe, and that, so they talk more about building community, and times of retribution are sometimes more important than restorative. But as they begin to go back to many, many years ago, centuries ago, and they see how the peace circles were, and they see and they can begin to apply some of the restorative justice, that's where they're trying to have their own sense of reconnection to what restorative justice is. It wasn't until, and I kept searching terms online because I knew we were talking, but not on the same wavelength. And it wasn't until I talked about the tribal courts, talked about talking circles, circles of sacred fire. So here are some of my notes that I had with the talking circle. When they have talking circles, they actually bring sacred objects to pass. It's kind of like the talking stick that we talk about. But many right now have not reconnected to this part of the culture. The Elder Council is working on reviving it. But what we heard is that the elders and the younger generation are kind of at odds with each other right now. And so there's that miscommunication. When they have a circle of sacred fire, one person speaks at a time, and they have different ages there. They speak about their lives, and they are allowed to talk as long as they want to, including for long pauses. And then they may say, please pray for me, indicating what their needs are. And then there's a time of being appreciative, a time of thanksgiving, a time of feeling what has been going on with them. And so just like we are working to advance restorative justice principles and practices, my sense is many Native Americans, Indians, however, indigenous people are also struggling to reconnect with some of those traditions from the past. Does that answer your question, Raj?
Yeah. And I'm just wondering whether you ever got a chance to go to any tribal court.
I know over in Maryland, the Powhatans have, and it may be this time of year, but they'll have powwows and they're open to the public. I've been to 2 or 3 of them where there's a lot of the dancing, a lot of the ceremonies, and opportunities to talk with different representatives of the Powhatans. There's another group too, I don't remember, but I remember seeing a lot of different Indian dancing and people talking about the symbolism of it and what it means and how they're striving for peace and unity and harmony, which all are restorative ideas.
Yeah, maybe I would like to get in touch with you later to see, what the procedure is, because I would like to attend one of their sessions, tribal court sessions. Yeah,
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can check with her. I'll make a note of that.
I would like to ask one more question if nobody has any, but I would wait.
So anybody have a question before Raj raises his next question? Okay, go for it, Raj.
I wanted to ask her actually this question, but I would like to discuss this with you. So JoJo was talking about how I believe her grandfather chose not to be the chief because his brother or cousin wanted to be the chief or something like that. And for her grandfather, I believe it was more about having peace and harmony in the community. I'm kind of trying to put that in the context of restorative justice practice, because for me, that is more of a preventive measure or a proactive measure to stop a potential conflict from arising. And I'm curious to know, how often do you see something of that nature happening in these in Native American communities, based on what you have seen? Yeah.
Yeah, that I wouldn't be able to answer, but I think probably in all cultures within families, you have your different dynamics that play into it. And all of us from time to time, to keep the peace, will just go along with it until it begins to cross a value. And so when it crossed the value and the authenticity of when meeting with the federal government, that's when they said, okay, we can't agree with that. You're not truly a chief. We may treat you as a chief within the dynamics of the family, but beyond that, it doesn't occur. That's my understanding, but I don't want to put words into JoJo's mouth. But thank you for asking that question. And if anybody else wants to chime in, I mean, you know, there are 6 of us, please feel free to. We'll just leave this as an open discussion for, you know, another 5 minutes or so. So Karen has posted a great resource that speaks to the question that was shared with our DCPT group. It's, Karen, do you want to kind of talk about what that is?
Sure. Jerry's actually the one, I believe it was your contact that sent that on to us. It's just a video of an individual sharing about balancing the identities of being a restorative justice peacekeeper and an Indigenous person, and talks about sort of the origins of that and how he navigates those two realms and identities. I found it very helpful as a non-Indigenous person, so I wanted to pass that along.
Okay, thank you. So any other questions or comments?
I would like to make a comment, but can we stop recording at this time, Jeri, before I make a comment?